Recording in progress.
Okay. So last time we finished by providing some completion of a discrete group coming from Tanakian category using the reconstruction theorem and the several type of representation you choose, several type of completion you get. So we talk about pro-algebraic, pro-reductive, pro-solvable, unipotent, pro-finite, etc. Completion of a group. So you can similarly, if you don't start from a group, from a Lie algebra, from any Lie algebra G over a field K of characteristic 0. You can also you can get the completion. Oh, it's not really a completion because what you get is a group, not a Lie algebra, but where star correspond to the type. I mean the completion type. Completion type. So as I said, algebraic, reductive, solvable, unipotent, etc. Which is a group defined using the category of representation of type star of the Lie algebra. So you use the reconstruction theorem and you get several type of group from a Lie algebra. And my guess is that if you start from a Lie algebra, which is good enough, for example, a finite dimensional simple Lie algebra over the complex field, and if you take the type of representation to be the finite dimensional representation, then the group you get should be the Lie group, I guess, in fact. I hope. So I guess that we recover the Lie group as above with if in some good case, if G is good enough. For example, take G finite dimensional simple Lie algebra over the complex field, then G red, in fact G, the red completion or the algebraic or reductive completion are the same here because the finite dimensional representation of a simple Lie algebra is completely reducible, or reduced to is semi-simple. And that should be the Lie group. So I guess, I just say I guess, should be it should be good. Anyway. So now we will provide some. So this is a small parenthesis about Tanakian category provided some example of Hopf algebra coming from group. So they are commutative or co-commutative Hopf algebra. But now we will provide some Hopf algebra which cannot directly come from group or in particular, or more precisely, they are not commutative or co-commutative. And the example we will provide will be called the quantum deformation of the Lie algebra SL2. So you will start from the Lie algebra SL2 or some Lie algebra, but if you start from some Lie algebra, you can make an algebra, a proper algebra called the universal enveloping. And there is a Hopf algebra structure on that. And you can deform, you can make a quantum deformation on that. And this is a Hopf algebra which is not commutative or co-commutative, which is yeah. So some more example of Hopf algebra. And I mean non-trivial ones. And by non-trivial, I mean non-commutative and non-co-commutative. So we will provide such example. So it's not directly, don't come directly from group theory, but indirectly come from group theory because the example we will provide are kind of deformation, quantum deformation. So it's still related to group theory. And the point I am interested in is to find, so not in this course, but in my research, is to find the example of Hopf algebra, or more generally, example of fusion category, which cannot come from group theory, even by some deformation or some co-cycle or something which are strictly independent of group theory. So this already exists for fusion category. But for Hopf algebra, for semi-simple finite dimensional Hopf algebra, this is unknown. So okay, so first, so this is a title. So first we will provide some example. We will recall the definition of the Hopf algebra given by a Lie algebra. So this will be co-commutative, but then we will explain the deformation. So let G be a Lie algebra and UG its universal enveloping. So what I mean by that, so universal enveloping, so there is a whole theory, full theory about that, but we mean just intuitively the largest algebra A in which the Lie algebra embed with an embedding such that the Lie algebra embedded in A generate A, as an algebra, and so the bracket, which is a structure of a Lie algebra, and so the bracket commute with the embedding. So the bracket of the Lie algebra is precisely the bracket of the algebra, which is like that, minus IB I. So in general, for a Lie algebra, the bracket is not of the form of this form. This is a abstract structure. But when you talk about universal covering, then you represent the bracket as this like that, AB minus BA. So it's yeah. So this is the largest algebra satisfying this property, the universal enveloping. So you have there is a off algebra structure on the universal enveloping of Lie algebra. So there is up algebra structure on UG, where delta is given as follow. So the co-multiplication delta is given as follow: x tensor 1 plus 1 tensor x for with x in the ending of the Lie algebra. Yeah. So we will, from now, we will identify the embedding of G with G itself. So we don't, so under this identification, you don't say X in I of G, you say X in G. It's the same. So this is this make of algebra structure on the universal enveloping, and so I don't write the details. What is about? I don't write the details about co-unit, etc. Moreover, so rep rep of U of G is a tensor category equivalent to rep of G. So you recover the representation of the Lie algebra itself. So in fact, the remark the universal enveloping grouping can be defined could also be defined like that, as recovering this tensor category of representation of the Lie algebra. It can be defined as a so you start from as recovering rep. You start via the some reconstruction theorem. I don't want to write details. Some reconstruction theorem. I will write may too. So you start from this representation and you make of algebra as before, and what you get may be, under some good case, the universal enveloping. As an of algebra. I'm not sure about that. So I put some may and some, so you get the idea. Anyway, the important point is that you have this, which is equivalent to this. We don't care we just need to use this universal enveloping of algebra to implement a quantum deformation. So before that, we will provide some definition for an element. For an element like that, satisfying this property will be called a primitive element. And for any bialgebra, the primitive element generate a Lie algebra. And we will also define what is called a group-like element and skew primitive element. This will generalize the notion of primitive element where you replace one by group-like element. So I will recall that. Okay. So definition. An element X of a bialgebra H is called primitive if you have the as for the Lie algebra before, if its co-multiplication is of this form. So let prim H be the space of primitive element. So here the bialgebra H is abstract, is general, but we will state that the space of primitive element is in fact related to some Lie algebra. As an exercise, you can show that the space of Lie element with the bracket is a Lie algebra. The space of primitive element with bracket is a Lie algebra. exercise. Show that prime h with a bracket is a Lie algebra. I'm not sure. Maybe I should remove that because it's not exactly like that I wanted to. So I have a doubt about the exactness of this sentence because we used the reconstruction theorem before to make a group from the representation. So anyway, so I put this between some parentheses. Should be careful about that. Maybe this sentence should be restated in something more correct. Anyway, so the space of primitive element has a Lie algebra structure, and moreover, you have the following property. So the counit vanish on such element, and the antipode is just taking a minus of the element if there exists an antipode. And so the proposition here is that the primitive element of the universal enveloping of a Lie algebra is the Lie algebra itself, where the Lie algebra over a field K of characteristic 0. So it should be of characteristic 0. If I remember that, I should have a counterexample. Yeah, this is the next remark, in fact. So above proposition is false in general. So as I said, we are in the Hopf algebra chapter of the book. So I want to go quickly, so I don't write the details of the proof. I don't write the proof. In fact, my goal, what I am really interested in this book are the chapter 7, 8, and 9. This chapter really provides the new material about tensor category. So I want to go as quick as possible. Maybe this semester we will be able to start the chapter 7 about module category. And we will finish the book we'll finish this chapter 7, 8, and 9 in the next semester. Okay, so so it's okay. So you have a good notion of a good way to characterize Lie algebra in the Hopf algebra framework. This is related to primitive element, and you have this, in some sense, reconstruction theorem. It is not called like that in the book, but yeah, that is good in the characteristic 0 setting. Okay. So now, what about a group-like element? So an element G in the bialgebra is called group-like if delta G equal G tensor G. So this notation, group-like, the way you call that group-like, come from the fact that, in fact, if you consider the off algebra of group algebra, then the elements are exactly, the elements of the group are exactly group-like. So the notation come from the fact that the off algebra structure on CG with G group is given by delta G equal G for G in the group, and then you generate the list by linearity. And in fact, every so remark, the space of group-like element of H generate subalgebra of the form CG for some, no more, but it's easier to say that the set of group-like elements is a group. The set of group-like elements form a group. Okay. So now you can combine the notion of primitive element with the notion of group-like element, and you get the notion of skew primitive element. And then we will provide an example of algebra where the element are, where the set of generators are group-like and skew primitive, called the Taft algebra. So what is skew primitive? So as I said, it is exactly as for primitive, but you replace one by a group-like element. So it's easy. What time is it? Okay. So definition. An element X in the bialgebra is called skew primitive. If delta X is equal to G tensor X plus X tensor H, where G, H are group-like. So it's a generalization of primitive. So a primitive element is a skew primitive. A primitive element is Q primitive with G equal H equal 1. In particular, the unit is always a group like. In fact, it generates a trivial group. Yeah. Anyway, delta 1 equal 1 tensor. Anyway, so so what is this example I was talking about, the Taft algebra? Taft algebra. So it's written as follows. So the bialgebra as an algebra is generated by two elements, X and J. J will be group-like and X will be skew primitive. So as an algebra, it is generated by this relation, Xn equal 1, Gn equal 1, Xn equal 0, and Gxg inverse equal Qx, generated as an algebra, where Q is a nth root of unit. Q power n equal 1. And we take n greater than or equal to 2. Then, easy to see that this algebra is of dimension n square, and it has a Hopf algebra structure with the following commultiplication: delta G is G tensor G, delta X is X tensor G plus 1 tensor X. So I don't write the co-unit. It should be, it was not written in the book. I guess it should be trivial. And so this one, so group like, and this one is Q primitive. It is not commutative. So what is yeah. Yeah. It's not commutative nor co-commutative. It is not not commutative, not co-commutative. So I write like that, not co-commutative. So I write co in parentheses, will mean that you can, it's not commutative, not co-commutative for both. Exactly as sometime I wrote co-evaluation map. In fact, this means you consider the evaluation map and the co-evaluation map. Here you consider commutative and co-commutative. It's just to be short. And it's not commutative. And he has a antipode S such that, so I don't write all the details. You have S square of X equal Qx, which is different from X. Okay. So you have so S square is different from the identity. So it's an example. When you consider the Hopf algebra of a group, in fact, the antipode is given by the inverse, so the S square is the identity. Here, S square is not the identity. Anyway, so I don't write details. I'm just giving some example and some properties, but it's not a course on Hopf algebra. It's not a course on quantum group. So if you are interested in that, you should use this piece of material to go beyond. Okay. So now, the more interesting, what we are interested in, what we mentioned before, the deformation of the universal enveloping of a Lie algebra. In particular, here we will talk about SL2 example. So this example is very famous. And we will focus more on that. Hopf algebra structure on what is called the quantum group UQSL2, the quantum deformation of the universal enveloping of the Lie algebra SL2. So then I will provide much more details about that than for the previous example. Okay. So remark. So we already know there is a Hopf algebra structure on the universal enveloping of SL2. So UQSL2 will be a quantum deformation for some number Q in the field, which is non-zero and not equal to 1 or minus 1. So we already know. But it's not a remark, it's an ID. We already know the Hopf algebra structure on the universal enveloping. Universal enveloping USL2. Now UQSL2 is a quantum deformation. So we will briefly explain in what sense, but we will define it and we will explain what sense it's a quantum deformation. Define with Q in the field, Q different from 0 and different for plus or minus 1. Okay. So we start from the Lie algebra SL2 So recall that SL2 is generated by 3 elements H, E, F, such that the bracket of H and E is 2E. The bracket of H and F is 2F, and the bracket of E and F is H. So motivating. So this. This lead to the following definition of UQSL. So we will, this will look like a bit of that. In fact, we will see after the pause. Definition. After the pause. So now we will make the pause. After the pause, we will define this quantum group UQSL2. Pause. Okay. Definition of the quantum group UQSL2. So let Q in the field Q different from 0 or plus or minus 1. The quantum group, so I put like that. This means, in fact, so we don't need here a precise definition what is a quantum group. Here it's just the algebra generated, so is generated by E by 3 elements E, F, K. With K invertible. K is invertible. Such that, so K inverse is Q square E. K F K inverse is Q power minus 2 F and E F. The bracket is K minus K inverse over K minus K, Q minus Q inverse. So you see that mimic a bit this relation. So it's not exactly the same thing, but there is a way to make that really a deformation. So we will not explain the details here. So before providing the Hopf algebra structure, the commultiplication, I will just write a remark about the meaning of the heuristical meaning of quantum deformation here. So, heuristically, wow, try to write better. Heuristically. So heuristically, so you see E, this E correspond to this big E, this small f correspond to this big F, but now we have H here and K. So the K do not correspond directly from the H, but K should be seen as Q power H. So it's heuristical. So it's not exact here. It's just intuitively, if you prefer, intuitively. So limit when Q go to 1 of Q minus Q inverse K minus K inverse over Q minus Q inverse is equal to H. Then limit when Q go to 1 of U Q SL2 is equal to U SL2, the universe enveloping itself. So again, I put some. So this is just heuristic, intuition. So you can make. So this statement can be made precise si the book of Cassel, the book of Cassel called the Quantum Group or something like that. So in anyway, that's why UQSL2 is called quantum deformation. Quantum deformation of USL2. By Q. So it's like you should think Q as H bar, so the Planck constant in quantum physics. Something like that. So it's a deformation according to some number here. Yeah, you are in quantum mechanics, you have the Planck constant, and when the Planck constant go to 1, then the quantum phenomenon, the quantum mechanics become a classical mechanics. Yeah. When H go to 1, quantum mechanics become classical mechanics. Classical mechanics. So anyway, this is the same idea. So it's a way to define new Hopf algebra. So we will provide now the Hopf algebra structure by deformation. So, theorem by deforming something classical. There exists a unique Hopf algebra structure on UQSL2 with delta K equal K tensor K, so group like, delta I equal I tensor K plus 1 tensor I, delta F is equal to F tensor 1 plus K inverse tensor F. So the first is group like. And the two other are skew primitive. Yeah. So what is the relation with the Taft algebra? So so we will see that you can quotient this UQSL2 by the relation E power L equal F power L equal 0 and K power L equal 1. And then, according to this quotient, you get a new Hopf algebra called the small quantum group. And then this small quantum group, you see that it exactly has, if you take what is E, this E and K will generate a Taft algebra up to this quotient. Because this is exactly the structure of the Taft algebra. Okay. And so we also provide the co-unit here with epsilon K equal 1, epsilon E. So I hope for the Taft algebra, it works also good for the co-unit. It should be okay. And the antipode on K is the inverse. K is group like, and S of E is minus E Q inverse S of F is minus KF. So you see, for group like the antipode is the inverse, and for primitive, the antipode is just minus. But because E is Q primitive, so it's a merge of group like and primitive, so you have this margin, this form. I don't know if it is generic for any skew primitive element, but at least this is what you get for this example. Maybe it's like that for any skew primitive element. I'm not sure. Okay. So as I said, where is you can quotient this Hopf algebra to make something finite dimensional, because here this is infinite dimensional. You can quotient to get something finite dimensional, and you should get some Hopf subalgebra isomorphic to the Taft algebra. So now assume that Q is a else root of unity with L greater than or equal to 3. So you will define the small quantum group UQSL2 to be the quotient of UQSL2, the big one, by the relation E power L equal F power L equal 0 and K power L equal 1. So you can write it like that. So it inherit Hopf algebra structure. So the Hopf algebra structure pass in the quotient. So it is called small quantum group. Quantum group attached to SL2. And you have the remark. Let me write this here. The dimension of it. So the dimension over the field K of UQSL2 is equal to L cube. And I guess that EQ generate the Taft algebra. Generate a Taft subalgebra of UQSL2. with Taft as we defined before. Taft, where is it? Here. You have this. So this is, you make this quotient, so you only need to check that. So is it true? I guess so. Yeah, it should be like that. This is related to that, the extra relation of the Taft algebra. So here Q is Q square. So it's a Taft algebra with Q equal Q square. Anyway. Okay. So that's okay for SL2. And you can generalize, remark, example, remark. It's more a remark because we will not provide the details. Above construction from SL2, Lie algebra, can be extended, can be generalized, to every finite dimensional simple Lie algebra using its Cartan matrix. And it is denoted U, the quantum group U, Q, G. So it's for those who are not familiar with Lie algebra theory, in fact, for any finite dimensional simple Lie algebra, so the structure of any finite dimensional Lie algebra is given by the structure of SL2. So you have several copies of SL2, and everything is managed by the Cartan matrix. That's why you can more or less reduce to the previous construction using the Cartan matrix. So I don't remember exactly, but so you can see, I don't know what to write exactly. I can. So for any no, I don't know. I just write it. I just say something orally. So as I said, any finite dimensional simple Lie algebra, you can find in some sense several copies of SL2, and everything is handled by the Cartan matrix. If you are interested, you should open a book of Lie algebra and look for Cartan matrix for finite dimensional simple Lie algebra. Anyway, the point is that you can generalize this construction, the above construction, for any finite dimensional simple Lie algebra. So you have many examples of algebra coming from deformation like that. And I guess also you get etc. Also the small etc. So now this provides a huge amount of example. Okay. So now we will change subject a bit. So we talked about Hopf algebra. So in fact, my first plan was to pass to chapter 6 now. But in fact, I hesitated to skip the chapter 6 because chapter 6 is mainly about additional result about non-submissible case. But I wanted to before chapter 6, so maybe I will not skip chapter 6, but mention some aspect of chapter 6 related to what is called quasi-Hopf algebra. In particular, the reconstruction theorem for quasi-Hopf algebra, which is related to finite tensor category, where you replace the fiber functor by the quasi-fiber functor. And why I'm interested in that? Because, in fact, you can prove that, in fact, the Hopf algebra with Hopf algebra, there is a correspondence with Hopf algebra and tensor category, finite tensor category, which are integral in some sense. So finite tensor category which are integral in some sense, and finite dimensional quasi-Hopf algebra. You no more need to talk about fiber functor of quasi-fiber functor. So there is there is a even stronger reconstruction theorem which do not use fiber functor or quasi-fiber functor for a notion of quasi-Hopf algebra related to integral finite tensor category. But we will explain that it is up to twist equivalence. And so up to twist equivalence, in fact, there is a kind of cheating here, because in fact, for quasi-fiber functor, in fact, two quasi-fiber functor will be always twist equivalent or something like that. But anyway, the point is that any finite tensor category admits a quasi-fiber functor if it is integral, which is not true. In fact, if you have something which is not integral, in particular, if you have some Frobenius parent dimension which are not integral, then it cannot have a fiber functor or quasi-fiber functor, because we will explain that the Frobenius parent dimension, or I already explained, that the Frobenius parent dimension is given by the dimension of the representation of the Hopf algebra or the quasi-Hopf algebra. In particular, if the Frobenius parent dimension is not an integer, then they cannot have a fiber functor or a quasi-fiber functor. So this is to explain also that about the reconstruction theorem we said before, the fiber functor or the quasi-fiber functor don't always exist. Anyway, So finite tensor category and reconstruction theorem for quasi-op algebra. Okay. So remark, first remark about previous reconstruction theorem. You should not believe, you should not think that every finite tensor category admit a fiber functor or even a quasi-fiber functor. It's not all, this does not always exist. We will see. We will see that if it exists, then the Frobenius parent dimension of simple object are exactly the dimension over the field K of the corresponding irreducible representation of a quasi-op algebra. In particular, so we will talk about quasi-op algebra now or next time, but I wanted to make this point now because it's important to have in mind that finite tensor category with fiber functor are really very specific one. Most of them do not have any fiber functor or quasi-fiber functor. So in particular, if there exists a simple object X with such that its Frobenius parent dimension is not an integer, which is the generic case. By generic case, I mean which is generical, or the generic case. By generic case, I mean this is most of the examples are like that, which is the generic case. Then the tensor category. So finite tensor category C. Then C admit cannot have a quasi-fiber fiber functor. That is really important. So in other words, most of the finite tensor category have no fiber functor or quasi-fiber functor. Okay. So this chapter on of algebra correspond to a very specific class of tensor category. Anyway, so now what about the reconstruction theorem? So this remark is finished. Now we can come back to Hopf algebra and quasi-Hopf algebra. So finite tensor functor with fiber functor or quasi-fiber functor. This is the point of what I will write now. The reconstruction theorem. Okay, so now the reconstruction theorem we mentioned before involved a fiber functor. By relaxing, if you relax by relaxing to quasi-fiber functor, we can get the new notion of quasi-bialgebra. Quasi-Hopf algebra. So this new notion will be the good notion to get a reconstruction theorem where you replace fiber functor by quasi-fiber functor. So in one place of the reconstruction theorem, you replace quasi-fiber functor by fiber functor, and so you have to replace Hopf algebra by quasi-Hopf algebra, and it's in fact this we will show that we will find this new notion like that. In fact, you will look for the new notion such that we can generalize the reconstruction theorem. Even if maybe it was defined before directly. The way of the book is to do the categorical way. So as I said, I will not go into the details today, but next time. So one interesting application of this new notion is the following. proposition. A finite tensor category C is integral if and only if. So I will explain integral later. This is not a definition of integral. This is a proposition about integral finite tensor category. If and only if. So think about. So in the semi-simple case, think about in the semi-simple case, this mean f prime of x in Z for all x simple object. But the book provides a more general definition of integral for non-semi-simple without assuming semi-simple. And then you need a projective object or something that maybe we will explain that later, or maybe not. I did not decide yet. Anyway, so integral, if and only if it is equivalent to a representation category of a finite-dimensional quasi-Hopf algebra. If and only if C is equivalent to the representation category of a finite-dimensional quasi-Hopf algebra. So remark. So first remark. So quasi-Hopf algebra, we will refine also later. The remark is exactly what I said before, what I wrote before. In the previous reconstruction theorem, all the finite tensor category are integral. And as I said, most of the finite tensor category are not integral. So this is what this proposition is saying. It's saying that if a finite tensor category is related to Hopf algebra or quasi-Hopf algebra, then it should be integral. Okay. Second remark. We don't, in the statement of the proposition, we don't mention quasi-fiber functor. So in this case, in the case of the proposition, a quasi-fiber functor always exists. So remember that quasi-fiber functor is like fiber functor, but without assuming the monoidal structure axiom. So I will explain a bit that next time, more details. So in the case of the proposition, a quasi-fiber functor always exists. And 2, 1 are twist equivalent. So leading to a reconstruction theorem without mention of a quasi-fiber functor. In fact, quasi-fiber functor, what is a fiber functor? A quasi-fiber functor, in fact, it's a forgetful functor to vec. And the object, the dimension of the object in vec are the dimension of the vector space over the field K. And everything is integral. In fact, the existence of a fiber functor of such or quasi-fiber functor, this is exactly the same thing as saying that it is integral. In fact, it is at least in the finite dimensional case. Maybe the infinite setting, you need to be more careful. In the integral finite dimensional case. Okay, so I will stop here. And next time I will explain how to get the new structure of quasi-bialgebra from a finite tensor category with a quasi-fiber functor. So the fact that the fiber functor is quasi, so it did not satisfy the monoidal structure axiom, and so you have an extra element called the associator, which replaces the associativity constraint of the vec, which is trivial. In fact, in vec, the associativity constraint is trivial, it's just one identity. And so if you not satisfy the modular structure axiom, this trivial associativity constraint is replaced by an associator, which is something else. And the main point is that for a quasi-bialgebra, the co-multiplication is no more co-associative. So the fact that the associator is not one make the co-multiplication no more co-associative. And this is the main difference between a bialgebra and a quasi-bialgebra. So we will see that later. So I will stop here now. So see you later.